I talk pretty loud. I probably should have a mic. But if you think that you can't hear, it's totally okay. But just bring your chair up here now, because this is about how I'm going to speak. So if you really feel like you can't hear clearly down there, it's totally fine. So anyway, welcome to the Wise and Wonderful Women. I am Ann Cutvillanane, and I am really glad to be here. I knew I was going to cry, but I didn't know I'd cry in the first 2 minutes. How many people are new? I love that. And that's about the number that's new at every meeting. And we just have people that are coming back all the time and circulating in, depending on their schedule, depending on the topic. And I just love that, because it's just new energy. And anyway, so welcome. And it takes a lot of guts to walk in the door, to not know usually anybody, or maybe just one person. And so that's why we do the bios. And one of my favorite things to do is the night before, today, I didn't get into it until today, this morning, but is to read those bios and to read what badass women you are, and all the life experience. I love it, and I love that we have all ages here. I mean, it's such an incredible group. And I love those bios because, like, we've got Judy, with Judy Katz, who's the 83-year-old new swimmer back there. I mean, you know. Elena St. James, a world-famous energy healer and mother of twins at the age of
57.
57. I mean, this is a lot of wild and wonderful women. So anyway, so welcome. Now, the reason why I also ask where you're from, is because I want you to share a cab or share a taxi, share an Uber, go on the subway together. So I'm just going to ask you to raise your hands. Who's from the Upper West Side? So there's a lot of you. But just make sure, share a cab and ask each other out.
What about the East Side?
Well, I'm getting to the East Side. Miss Obian, do you live on the East Side? Yes, you do, Queen. Who lives on the Upper East Side? Yes, okay, wait, Lisa and Barbara over there. Okay. So, I mean, Upper East Side, okay, that's good. Downtown. Who lives in Hudson Yards? Anyway, Queens. Okay, Queens. Brooklyn?
Westchester.
Brooklyn, yes. Okay, Westchester, well, you're gonna have to drive. Anyway, so welcome. So what's on your table? A little bit of housekeeping. So there's the Annie Gets It Done pens, which by mistake we ordered. I think it was something like 50,000. It was something so crazy. I've had them for so many years. Please take them home. They have lived with me for far too long. But they're there because if you're taking notes or writing anything down, if you're on your phone and you're doing it, I'm going to think I'm boring you, and that you're texting somebody, and I'm going to be all distracted. So anyway, and then there's pads there. Feel free to take those home too, but use them for notes, because Dr. Suzanne is going to give you some things that you should write down. Even I will, but there will be a thank you email afterwards, and it will also contain as much information as I can remember that you might need. So what's also on those cards, it will be a save the date. Now, if any of you got to save the date before, that date has now changed, and it is now October the 16th. So Chris Quintera, Dr. Chris Quintera, she is a wonderful gynecologist, also reproductive rights advocate, and she's going to be talking about with another doctor who's over at Cornell. Anyway, and just kind of giving us kind of up-to-date news about what's going on and what we need to know. There's a lot of changes that we need to know, and other women that we can help, and so that is going to be a fabulous meeting happening on the 16th. And then there's also Impact 100. Anybody a member of Impact 100? Okay, they are actually having a meeting shortly. I think, anybody remember? What is it? Wednesday. Okay, if anybody's interested in joining this group, $1,000 donation, you don't have to do it every year, but $1,000 donation goes to making impactful grants to New York-based nonprofits, but we all get together, if you want to or not. You can just give your $1,000, that's it. You can be on a grant committee, you can, and you end up voting about who is going to get those grants. And we raised last year, I think it was $350,000. But it's a wonderful group of women, and so it's on there, and if you want more information, they might be sold out, but just email me if you want to go, and I'll get you in. And then there is ADESA, okay? So that is something Dr. Suzanne is going to tell us about. You're going to get an email tomorrow, probably, and it's going to tell you more about it, but it's going to help you, if you choose to, take a journey to have a healthier heart. And it's a super interactive app that I think many of you are going to find really, really helpful. And Suzanne is going to tell us a little bit about it today, but you're going to get an email that really spells it out because there's so many nuances to it, and it's incredibly, incredibly well done. So I really, there was not enough to put on that card, but I really want you to kind of look into that, and if there's anybody that you think can use it, just let us know. Anyway, okay. Flowers on the table, make sure somebody should take them, not the vase, which people have tried to do. Like, I don't know, I'll give you a vase if you need it, but that's okay. One other thing. Also, group shot at the end. I have not done this. I've never taken a group shot, but I want to for this meeting because it's because of you and this community that we have created that's brought so much knowledge to me as I interview these guests, and it's because you show up that it really helped me. It helped save my life, really. So I want to thank you. And I'm thinking of doing a long weekend, and we have so many people that are part of this group that have so many resources that will offer to do an hour kind of workshop. And I'm thinking of doing it up in a wild place called Hemlock Never Sink, okay? So that probably does not make you want to run and sign up. But I went up there to check it out. There's only 32 rooms. It's like an hour and 45 minutes away. It's December 6th to December 8th is when I'm thinking about doing it, but if I don't get enough people to sign up right away, then I'm not going to be able to do it. It's going to be $1,600. It's going to include everything, your room, all the food. There's indoor pool, whatever. Anyway, so if you're interested, I'm going to send an email out about it. Just let me know because I'm going to need to pull the trigger or not, because otherwise I can't do it. And I will try to do it later in the year, but December 6th to the 8th. And that, I think, is the housekeeping. So, one other thing, keeping in touch. So there is a Wise and Wonderful Women's Facebook page. Please sign up, you might as well. It's private, so you just have to kind of give me your information. Follow me on Instagram, you'll be entertained, always. I think that's it. So this meeting, for those of you that have not come before, typically I have someone up here with me. So this is very different. I am going to read, and it's going to not be short because this is a little bit of a journey, but it was important for me. I've written sort of an article that I'm hoping to give to the person that you'll realize who I'm going to try to have her kind of publish it. But I wrote it down so that you wouldn't miss anything. So make yourself comfortable. I'm going to take you on this kind of crazy ride. This is where it began. I ran up to my assigned spot outside the Amsterdam airport, and the driver smiled and welcomed me in. All 7 of us were exhausted and filled with nervous energy as we drove through the Dutch countryside to our magic truffle retreat. Just picture Hulu's 9 Perfect Strangers. Back in New York City, my life was hectic. I was a single mom of 2 daughters, one of the top real estate brokers in the city, and I ran 2 nonprofits. And to say that I was running on empty is an understatement. And after the loss of my mother from Alzheimer's and a debilitating breakup, my emotional baggage no longer slipped neatly under the seat in front of me. And I knew things needed to change. So that's why I was there. Annie Gets It Done is gonna fix it all in 5 days. At 61, I prided myself on feeling half my age, being a poster girl for good health, and I worked out every day, ate a veggie-filled diet, I didn't smoke, drink, or take recreational drugs, and I promoted heart and brain health on my social media platforms and to the 2,000 wise and wonderful women. Day 4 of the retreat. Extensive research had led me to this retreat. Psilocybin was legal in the Netherlands, and this program had a 1-to-1 ratio of guests to faculty, and certainly it had to be safe, I thought. But I couldn't shake the sense of dread that I had. The first truffle experience had been draining but cathartic, and our final journey was about to begin. But walking back to my room, my phone dropped and eerily started playing Maria Shriver's podcast. And as I feverishly tried to turn it off, the words of her guest, Christina Applegate, looped continually. It doesn't matter if they think you're a hypochondriac. Be a hypochondriac. Honestly, you've got to be your own advocate. Sitting in the circle, the teachers explained to us that it was necessary to change the dose and increase it, and everybody looked calm, but I was on edge. My anxiety was rising, but I focused on smiling, looking at the smiling faces around me, and I whispered my intentions over the brewing truffle tea, and I said, help me be more emotionally present, especially for my daughters. I sipped the final drop, laid down on my mat, and put on my sleep mask. And in minutes, I was horribly sick and wired. The next hour, I tried to ease into the calm journey that everybody else around me was having, but my heart was racing and I was consumed by nausea. Everybody looked so serene and I felt like I was drowning. Not wanting to interrupt the calm of the room, I walked out and got on a mattress that was out in the hallway. For 2 more hours, Mary, one of the retreat staff, rubbed my back as I sobbed, gagged, and went through what I can only describe as an emotional exorcism. The truffle psychedelic effects were wearing off, and now I had a shooting pain in my back. Thinking it was from bending over the pail for hours, I headed back into the room to rest. Most of the faculty members were at the altar singing, playing instruments and swaying side by side. They weren't able to drink the tea, but they were high as hell. And I laid down and I closed my eyes and I just said, please let this be over. 5:30. The pain was unrelenting and now it was in my chest. Then I started having trouble breathing. I sat up, I needed help, but the staff members were too absorbed in their emotional, spiritual awakening to see that I needed assistance. So I crawled on my hands and knees, and then I got up, and I stumbled out the door to find Mary. I need an ambulance, please, I can't breathe. There's a shooting pain in my chest. I rattled off my medical history. I was gasping for air. Okay, I have high cholesterol. I've got a history of clots. I told her about the pulmonary embolism that almost killed my mother in her 60s. She patted me on the back and asked sincerely, why do you think these feelings are coming up? Applegate's words flashed through my mind again. Be your own advocate. For the next 2 hours, the only help I got from the staff was to move me from one chair to the other, inside and out, countless glasses of ginger water, and the assurance that I was just being emotional as I struggled to stay calm. As each member of the resort's management team showed up, I had to repeat my medical history and symptoms, and I always ended with, please, could you just call me an ambulance? I was certain that clots had filled my lungs. I was paralyzed with the fear that I was going to have a stroke. This can't be happening. My daughters need me. People were coming in and out, nervously speaking in Dutch, and finally I heard paramedics. Thank God, help is on the way. 8 o'clock. The staff briefed the 3 paramedics in Dutch, and as soon as I heard truffles, they all seemed to relax. I was completely sober, and Mary had made it clear that the truffles had been out of my system for hours, but the focus was on a bad trip and not the chest pain and my inability to breathe. Do you do yoga? One of them asked. Yes, I answered, not sure why that was relevant. Please, Now breathe like you're doing yoga. They all stared. So what does that even mean, I wondered, but feeling trapped, I cooperated. When that didn't help, they took out a paper bag and made me breathe into it. That only made breathing harder. When the lead paramedic then took out the EKG, checked my heart, my oxygen levels, and announced with a smirk, "Oh, it's not your heart." Clearly, I was just an emotional woman. Then I heard that socialized medical system in the Netherlands meant that I couldn't simply just walk into a hospital. These 3 men were my only way out, and the terror set in because they started to pack their equipment and go. I'm gonna die in a foreign country? My brain screamed. But maybe if they like me, they're gonna help me. I just have to keep them talking. So have you ever been to New York? Really? Wow, did you like it? Do you have any kids? Are you married? Well, tell me about them. It took all my physical and emotional strength to keep this dialogue going. But after they had been with me for an hour, they were ready to go. I grabbed the older paramedic's hand and I looked him in the eye and I said, "Please, is there anybody else that you can call?" After throwing in a pretty please, the man just kind of went and shrugged and said, "Fine," kind of like, "Let's humor her." So they called a supervisor. I heard Truffles. And then he handed me the phone. Knowing this woman held her fate in my hands, my breath became even more labored. But halfway through, even rattling off my symptoms, she cut me off. "I've heard enough. Have them bring you in." The paramedics were overruled, and they were not happy. Oh no, it gets worse. So I thanked them profusely, and we headed out of the room, and I was following behind them, dizzy and nauseous, and afraid I would pass out, but I just wanted to get the hell out of there. Playing nice and being a good girl had gotten me this far, so I didn't want to insist that they get the gurney. When the sirens started, the reality and the terror set in. I held my head in my hands and closed my eyes, and that's when the flashback started. The surroundings were unfamiliar, but the soft skin of the older woman's arm leaning into me wasn't. It was just light enough to see my mother's silhouette sitting next to me. She was sitting shoulder to shoulder next to her mother. Both women were looking down, fists tight and not speaking a word. But instinctively I knew they were using every inch of their strength to protect me and not from moving into the dark void that I could see over my grandmother's head. I just felt peaceful. I whispered that I loved them and I missed them, and I thanked them for keeping me safe. 9:20. I was jerked awake as the gurney wheeled through the emergency room, past the doctors and the handsome nurses all dressed in their crisp white uniforms and into my room. Dutch ER waiting rooms are not filled with humanity, all teeming with humanity. In fact, they're quite eerily quiet. I was one of only 2 patients on the whole floor. With no sense of urgency, the paramedics casually explained in Dutch my Truffles experience. They all smiled and stared. Still gasping for air, I was given a blanket and told to relax, as though my masseuse would be in shortly to give me a massage. The first order of business was not a blood test, oxygen, or even a heart monitor. A nurse came in with a box, and he pointed it at the blank wall next to me. Instantly, images from inside an aquarium appeared, swimming fish and all, and he smiled. "Do you like it?" My heart sank. Scenes of One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest had run through my head. Yeah, sure. My New York cardiologist, Dr. Steinbaum, had called my cell. Just as I finished telling her what had happened, the ER doctor strolled in. Through the speaker, Suzanne introduced herself, shared quickly my medical history, and implored the doctor to please take this seriously. She needs a blood thinner. Through the speaker, he thanked her and quickly ended the call. Pulling a chair to the end of my bed, he leaned in and asked, "Has anybody ever talked to you about a bad trip? You need to relax." Shit. Still gasping for air, I begged him for a CT scan, promising to pay whatever it would take. And he shook his head and he said, "That's not how it is here." Suzanne's texts were nonstop. "Are you on oxygen? Did they take blood? You need a blood thinner. You need a CAT scan. Stat." I wrote back, "No, I know." But they said no. Finally, my blood was drawn. The results would take 30 minutes. Their EKG also showed nothing. And while one nurse fumbled with the echocardiogram, she blurted out, "I'm not very good at this." The other one handed me pills. "Here, take these." I smiled with relief. "Oh, the blood thinner." "No, a sedative. It'll help you sleep." The fear of being labeled uncooperative was trumped by my inner voice screaming, "Stay alert and stay awake." I thanked him. "I don't need it." 9:50. Where was Mary? She had assured me that she would follow me in the ambulance with her own car. I repeatedly had asked the nurses, wasn't there anybody there to see me? They said no. At least 5 times I walked unaided and unmonitored down a nearly empty hall to the bathroom, each time making sure to wave to the nurses and the doctors behind the desk to make sure that they remembered I was still there. I had been warned. For years, Dr. Steinbaum had spoken to many of my women's dinners, always stressing 2 things. Heart attacks and stroke symptoms are often different for women, and women are often not taken seriously during these episodes. Christina's mantra also kept playing through my head. It doesn't matter if they think you're a hypochondriac. You need to advocate for yourself. When Mary finally walked through the door, the swimming fish stunned her. The nurses had kept her outside for nearly an hour, insisting that no one was there to see me. More gaslighting. As soon as she sat down, I asked her for her phone number so I could text her the list of the names of all the people that she should contact, just in case. "What about your daughters?" she asked. The floodgates opened. I couldn't stop crying. This can't be happening. 11:20. Where are my results? The bloods had been taken 90 minutes before. I pushed the call button and the male nurse sauntered in. "Please, can you check my results again?" Panic struck is the only way I can describe his face as he squinted at the screen. My heart sank again. He ran for backup. Now there were 3 or 4 people coming in and out of the tiny room, all speaking in Dutch in a fevered pitch. "Mary, please, what are they saying?" "Some enzymes are high," she said. I could tell she didn't either understand or she didn't want to tell me. "Please," my hand shook as I handed my phone to the nurse and I said, "Please, could you just take a picture of the screen?" He obliged, and I sent it immediately to Dr. Steinbaum. The staff was racing around, bringing in medication and finally reconnecting to the heart monitor and blood pressure cuff that had been taken off an hour before. "Mary, please, I'm so sorry, Anne. You've had a heart attack."
Oh, Jesus.
The nurse had a bag full of fluid and was about to put the needle in my arm. "Nothing is going into my body until you tell me what it is." A heparin IV, the blood thinner. It was about time. Suzanne texted me, "You need a blood thinner right now." "Yes," I replied. "Heparin's going in. Beta blocker, nitroglycerin, oxygen." She texted back, "Yeah, it's coming." We had both begged for these hours before. Midnight. It was imperative that I knew what was going on with my body, so grabbing my phone, I opened up the screenshots of the results. "Okay, Siri, what does a 383 tropamine level mean?" If your blood test shows higher than normal amounts of tropamine, it means that you've had some damage to your heart muscle. High levels often mean that you've had a heart attack. Shit. "Siri, what does the CK level of 248 mean on my blood results?" Elevated CK levels may indicate heart and muscle damage, maybe brain damage, or degeneration. That news was not great, but putting the pieces together made me feel better. "Siri, what tests show if I've had a blood clot?" One test shows to diagnose a blood clot is D-dimer. I checked mine. Okay, some good news. That's not elevated. Focus, Anne, focus. I told myself I need to read every single word, so I started at the top, and I was stunned. I had to read it 3 times. My blood results had been posted at 10:30, more than an hour earlier, and no one had bothered to look at them. My heart attack had started 7 hours ago, back at the retreat, and the panic was almost unbearable. What am I going to tell my girls? Time was running out. It was 6 p.m. in New York. If I had any chance of getting there that day, they'd have to be on an evening flight. It was Riley's birthday weekend, and Jackie was still at work. I wanted to shield them, to tell them about what was happening, but I knew that they needed to know. In steadying my voice, I made the hardest call of my life. They dropped everything and were there on the plane in 3 hours. When the doctor walked in, I growled through my clenched teeth, "You're gonna turn that fish video off, and you're gonna give me a CT scan now, or I'm calling the US Embassy." The CT scan didn't show much, but with the high tropamine enzymes and that elevate within 12 hours of a heart attack, I would have to be transported in the morning to the larger teaching hospital for an angiocardiogram. 3:30 a.m. I climbed into my private room bed. Even with all the meds, I was having a hard time breathing, and my mind was racing. I was worried sick about my girls, and I was exhausted, and the what-ifs haunted me. What if I'd taken that sedative in the ER? I would be dead. What if I hadn't been able to convince the paramedics to take me here? I'd be dead. I closed my eyes, and I just tried to breathe. 11 a.m. Thankfully, UMCU was just 20 minutes away, and it was the country's best hospital. Their team explained how a narrow tube and a microscopic camera would be moving through my arm and into my heart, allowing them to see things more clearly. Within minutes, it showed a 40% blockage in one of my arteries, and that on its own was not alarming, but the tear next to it was, and it required a stent. In minutes, it was inserted into the same tube, and I was finally able to breathe, actually and figuratively. Within hours, I was back at the original hospital, and after hearing my girls' voices during their layover and being able to assure them that what was broken had been fixed, I was finally able to sleep. My girls didn't arrive until 8 p.m. I had been pacing the halls for hours, attached to my monitors, and as soon as they walked through at the elevator doors, they fell into my arms, and we all cried. A parent getting a call from the ER saying their child drank too much or took drugs is sadly pretty common. But having to drop everything and fly to a foreign country to rescue your mom from the effects of a bad trip was nuts. They were exhausted, traumatized, and as the days went on, really angry. The shame and guilt weighed on me. If I'd simply had a heart attack, it wouldn't have been my fault. I felt like I had done this to myself. Over the next 4 days, they steadfastly stood by my side. My sister also flew in. They took turns sitting with me and walking down the halls, bringing me healthy meals to replace the meat and cheese sandwiches that the hospital gave me on the cardiac floor, and butter. I was released with discharge papers that were translated in English and a list of medications to buy from the pharmacy downstairs. And I was advised not to fly for 10 days. Leaving the hospital, I was just desperate for everything to be back to normal. But every step I took, and every breath and every step I took scared me. We were in a foreign country without the medical safety net. My girls were petrified and they were protective. I just wanted to protect them and erase the whole thing. And what I didn't realize, I was in shock and I was in denial about what had happened. I just stuffed it down and focused on just salvaging the trip. I pushed to leave Utrecht and to head to Amsterdam, where I had booked a really cool Airbnb, and the girls were really apprehensive, but I prevailed. Come on, it'll be fun. The house was stunning. The girls and I took walks and curled up on the couch to watch Netflix and filled the fridge with food from the local supermarket, and we were making the best of it, but we were all very much on edge. The next morning, my heart didn't feel right. My Apple Watch showed the heart rate was way up, and even more concerning was the chest pain. We were now 45 minutes from Utrecht. I knew I couldn't just walk into a hospital. Calling the American Embassy, I explained to the young woman the situation, and she rudely just hung up on me. Luckily, I had written down the number of the cardiac desk before I had left the hospital. So I called and they said to come in. I was just scared. I wanted to present as calm as I possibly could for the girls. Hey, I'm just not feeling 100%. So maybe we should just go back to the hospital before we, fly back. Let's just call an Uber and head over. I was on autopilot. I grabbed nice nitroglycerin spray, baby aspirin, blood thinners. I don't even know how that would have helped me. My hands were trembling as I got into the car, and the fear only grew as we left the city center and became surrounded by cows and pastures. We're in the middle of fucking nowhere. It's gonna take anybody forever to get to us. I tried to make small talk, but my voice was so shaky and my mouth was so dry, I didn't want the girls to know I was panicking. So I just stared back at my watch and didn't say a word. The gaslighting continued. My monitor was showing my heart rate was very elevated. Well, it's not your heart, the doctor said. It's probably anxiety. You're just afraid, another one explained. You've had a heart attack. As though I didn't know. Your mind plays tricks on your body. No shit. The week before, I had assembled the A-team to help me. Dr. Suzanne and Anne Marie, a patient advocate, were in the States, and friends had found me 2 Netherlands-based doctors. The Dutch medical system would not allow me to see them or pay them, but it was comforting to know that they were there in the same country. For nearly 24 hours, the hospital continued to tell me that nothing was wrong, that I was fine, but I knew I was not. I pushed back hard, asking for more UMCU testing, but it wasn't until one of my A-team Dutch doctors who had recently retired from that hospital called the cardiac floor and read them the riot act. After being readmitted, I had made a detailed list of every medication that I had been taking. And that morning, I took a statin, a blood thinner, and a beta blocker to lower and regulate my heart rate. By noon, yet another ambulance took me to UMCU for additional testing. A couple hours later, Anne Marie, the patient advocate, called to hear the results. I said, I am starting to think I'm crazy, but I feel better, and my heart rate went down shortly after they told me that I was gonna have another CT scan. But we both knew I wasn't crazy or a hypochondriac. I read through my morning medication. Okay, I took a statin, an aspirin, a blood thinner, a beta blocker, and she said, no, nothing's new there. You've been taking them every day. And I said, no, I was never prescribed a beta blocker. We looked back at the discharge papers. The list of medications that I was treated with included beta blockers on page 1. But on page 2 and on the pharmacy list, they had mistakenly left it off, probably during the translation to English. I called Dr. Suzanne, who picked up just as the female radiologist walked into my room to issue my newest CT results. I quickly asked Suzanne to hold, hitting the speaker button, putting her down on the bed. That's when I found myself sitting across from Nurse Ratched in another scene from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Your test came in. There's nothing wrong with you. She looked at me intently. Are you all right? Are you mentally? Are you okay? I was so shocked that I just laughed. Yeah, I'm fine. And you know what? I just think I figured out why I'm having heart issues, because I wasn't given the proper medication when I was discharged. I'm not really sure that you're well, she slowly repeated. I looked at her and smiled, and I said, well, my doctor's on the line. By the way, Suzanne, do you have any questions? And she said, no, that was very clear. And she hung up. The radiologist's rage was palpable. Her cheeks were flushed, her teeth were clenched. You had no right to have your doctor listen to our conversation. And she stormed out. I called Suzanne back, and she was shaken and near tears. I'm so sorry this is happening to you. The sad fact is that this just didn't happen to me because I was in a foreign country. Women are subjected to medical gaslighting all day, every day, and it happens in every country around the world, and it needs to fucking stop.
Yes.
61-year-old man had been brought into the emergency room who couldn't breathe, who had chest pain, a history of clots, and elevated cholesterol, he would never be told to calm down or breathe into a paper bag or like he was doing yoga. Let's not forget the added Saving Nemo video that was playing behind the wall. There were no words how grateful I am to my A-team, headed by Dr. Steinbaum. Suzanne, you not only helped me navigate that nightmare in real time, but also through your wise warnings and wisdom that you've given me over the last 6 years that saved me. I'm also so grateful to Christina Applegate and Christina and Maria Shriver, who bring so much light into the world, and to you ladies. Because of you, medical gaslighting must stop. And I know that because I learned that in these rooms. And we all must remember Christina's word. You must advocate for yourself.
I was following along with my text messages as she was reading hers to you. The last text message before that, I sent you your cholesterol levels.
Before I went to the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Right, 232.
And I said, let's discuss next steps when you get home. Enjoy. And it was the following, so that was on May 28th.
And
And
May
on
31st.
Friday, May 31st at 3:30 in the afternoon, that's when this whole thing started.
Right. So I was having, you know how they always say that you have to get medical attention quickly? It was 7 or 8 hours before I was given medical help. But this just, at first I was like, well, this happened because I was doing mushrooms. The chemical reaction of the mushrooms, it was kind of like the perfect storm, they think. I had a blockage, but that wouldn't have caused it. I had what for my body, and again, mushrooms, all of the drugs that are out there, any drug that's out there, for one person's body is okay and another person's it's not. I had a really bad reaction to it from the moment I took it, and my heart was pounding. But it was that, it was the gagging, it was the emotion. There's broken heart, heart attacks, right? So it was all of that. But the fact that it was when it started and when I asked for help, it was hours. And at any point along the way, if I stopped pushing, I would be dead. And the same thing happened. I just found out a friend of mine on the island where I have a house, same thing. She had a history of heart disease, and they told her she was fine, and she was just upset, and she was dead. So we need to not be operating with fear, but we need to know what our risks are, because I knew I had risks. And honest to God, if anybody had asked me if I was having a heart attack, I would not have, I didn't. I thought I was going to have a stroke. I thought I was having a pulmonary embolism. And really, that's what saved me. Because if I did not think I was having a heart attack. I really thought it was an embolism. I thought the pain in my chest was blood clots. It shouldn't make it any less nerve-wracking. But anyway, does anybody have any questions? Because I know
I
that...
want to
go ahead.
start off
Yeah.
with a couple of things that everyone needs to understand, just to level the playing field here. 59% of women who have cardiac issues have experienced some form of gaslighting. 59% of women. When women go to the emergency room, they have a 30% increase in delay of care. In medical school, we're taught time is muscle, which is why I kept saying blood thinners, aspirin, angiogram, over and over. They need to do this now. because for every minute you wait, that troponin, those blood tests, the CPK, these are markers of damage, they go up. 30% delay of care in the United States when a woman walks into the emergency room. We have a major, major problem. I always would tell my patients, when you go to the emergency room, please do not wear lipstick or makeup. Put dirt on your face and look as bad as you possibly can, because that is the only way you possibly might be able to get help. What happened to Anne wasn't just gaslighting. She had true and honest abuse. I was on the phone. It was unbelievable the way that she was spoken to. That last doctor kept taunting her. What's wrong with you? What do you think is wrong with you? It was shocking. It was shocking. But I'm not going to say that's a problem that happened there and it does not happen here, because a colleague of mine, a cardiologist, I hope nobody in this room, as I start telling the story, knows I'm telling who I'm talking about, but she recently had an accident. She fell. She had a fracture of her jaw, and she went to a surgeon to have it fixed. And after she was discharged, it did not get better. And she was wise enough to understand that this was probably an infection, and she went back to him, and he said, "You're fine." She went home. She ended up needing an IV PICC line with antibiotics for 6 weeks and massive surgery. A cardiologist on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. So I can go on and on and on and on. The way my career started was because I was everybody's, not second opinion, I was everybody's third opinion. After they were dismissed, misdiagnosed, and completely neglected and ignored by two of the other most fabulous cardiologists in New York City. And that's what I kept hearing over and over again.
Who probably were men.
We need a women's hospital.
Yes, we do. No joke. No
Right?
joke. The woman on the other end of that phone, I had all these men. I was gasping for air. She heard me for 2 seconds. She's like, "I've heard enough. Bring her in." Like, I can't breathe. I mean, there were so many little angels. What I left out of the story too, which was interesting, it was like day 2 or 3. I spent 5 days in the hospital, and then another 2 when I was perfectly fine, which I just was not taking the most important medicine you're supposed to take. But the nurse from the ER came in, the one that said I'm not very good at this echocardiogram, who was the only person being honest in the whole room, right? No one was good at anything that they were doing. But anyway, so she came in, and she said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I want to apologize." She said, "I'm so sorry. That was a really big learning experience for us." Which, thank God that she said that, because it was a big learning experience. Because yes, they were swayed by the mushrooms, right? But no one was listening. No one, like, I get it, but things can be. You could have the flu and be having a heart attack. Like, it's a doctor's job to say, there might be something else going on, but what are the symptoms? I mean,
So I always tell the story of a man. This is a study that was done. A man and a woman walk into an emergency room. They read the same exact script to the doctor. The man is admitted to the hospital with possible heart attack, and the woman is discharged with the diagnosis of stress, anxiety, or depression.
and maybe some value.
This is truth and reality. When we communicate, our words are the most critical tools we have. And part of what we need to understand is how to speak up. Not only to speak up, but how we use our words is the most essential tool we have. One of the things, and I'll talk about it later, but in starting Adesso, this software that we're talking about, It's to give you the words, and I want to do that for you a little bit tonight. I don't think you could have gotten help. You said all the right things. In the United States, all you have to say, ready? I think I'm having a heart attack. Write that down. If you don't do anything, I'm going to sue. And I'm not kidding.
But here's the thing. It's like almost like a Stockholm syndrome-esque kind of thing.
Yeah.
You are completely at their mercy. So what I was weighing, and it doesn't matter whether I was in the Netherlands, weighing the
Do I be
aggressive
kind
New
so
Yorker.
they help me?
No,
Or do I?
no, exactly.
Right.
But you are there, and we have all been in a nursing situation with a family member, yourself, or whatever. You want to play that line where you're being assertive, you're being aggressive, but you also are at their mercy, right? And so if you piss them off, you're dead in the water. Like
I hear what you're saying. In the United States, though, they have to write down what you say. And because of that, we're in a little bit of a different situation. This isn't the emergency room. This isn't to the doctor that you're trying to have a relationship with. I do not recommend that at all. But when you're in the emergency room and you're trying to get help because you think something is wrong and you're not getting the help you need, you don't have to start off on that foot. You can express yourself, tell your symptoms, tell your family history. I have a history of clots, I have a history of high blood pressure. And then if you do not get the help you need, that's the best way to do it. If you're in a relationship with your physician and you go through this and you are not getting the help you need, get another doctor, honestly. There's a question in the back.
Hi. So as it relates to that decision as to whether to go to the emergency room, what should we be looking for? I mean, what are the signs of a stroke, of a heart attack? I mean, you hear that women have different signs than men, and I think we've all been we're all well learned about what a man experiences, but what does a woman experience?
So I'm going to go through this answer in two different ways. When a man typically has a heart attack, it's described as an elephant sitting on the chest. There is an elephant sitting on the chest.
You know, the like.
It's a heaviness in the chest, a feeling like you can't breathe, radiation of pain down the left arm, possibly to the jaw. That is what is considered a typical heart attack. What leads up to that days before is oftentimes this chest pressure with exertion that is relieved with rest. That is called classic and typical angina that often precedes a heart attack. With women, it can be very different. Jaw pain, back pain, nausea, vomiting, shortness of breath is just as common as chest pain, although chest discomfort, that pressure, is very, very typical for women as well. But it could also be flu-like symptoms and sleeping, inability to sleep. How many of you have had those symptoms in the past week? Right? So how do we know? And this is when I tell every woman that this is when exercise becomes essential, or you have a life routine. Because if you're used to exercising or walking 10 blocks at a certain pace, and all of a sudden it's harder and more difficult, your body's not getting oxygen for whatever reason. And that's when you have to think about your heart. That fatigue. My gosh, I just got an email from a doctor I'm working with in Arizona, a 51-year-old woman who is adopted. She did not know her family history. She's obese, has high blood pressure and high cholesterol, and she was saying that she was fatigued. And they said, lose weight. 4 months. We put our testing program in their office, and I got an email from the doctor. She had a 99% blockage in her top artery. If that woman went home, she would have died in her sleep. I'm telling you this not only to tell you the pervasiveness of this problem, but I'm telling you this because you need to be empowered to not have this be your story. And you need to tell 4 friends when you leave here, and have them tell 4 friends. The other symptoms of stroke: facial asymmetry, so a drooping face, difficulty speaking, arm weakness, it's a one-sided problem often. Dizziness could be part of it as well, difficulty walking, and slurring of speech, aphasia, difficulty speaking. The treatment for both of those, including clots, is a blood thinner. Just get the blood thinner. We'll figure it out after. Just get the blood thinner in, right? And so how do you know when it's time to go to the hospital? When you know that how you are is not the person you were a week ago, 3 days ago, and you're having these very non-specific symptoms, shortness of breath, palpitations, something is going on, jaw, back pain, that's when you go to the emergency room. And the worst thing to happen is you're wrong. Those doctors are paid per shift to be there. They have to be there whether you come in or not. You're not bothering them. You're not disturbing the system. You are not imposing yourself on them. This is what I hear from women all the time. They are there. That's their job. You might as well show up.
I mean, even when I was in the room, when I felt like I was having a heart attack, I'm like trying to get out to not bother anybody, right? Like, it's like taking up space. Like, I don't want to bother anybody. Like, it's screwed up, right? But it's like that, you know, somebody knocks into me walking down the street, I apologize. They would just walk into me. It you know, it's just it's a little bit more of a feminine thing. Like, we're like a female energy. And so you were saying also that women would call for their husbands the ambulance, but for themselves, it's like, I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to be, you know, like, I'm sure it's nothing. It doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if they think you're a hypochondriac. It doesn't matter if it turns out to be nothing. Who cares? One of the
So you made a mistake.
And one of the great tools, and I'll tell you, you need an Apple Watch. And again, don't rely on the Apple. I mean, if you're having these other symptoms and your Apple Watch says you're fine, 2 EKGs said nothing was wrong with me.
Well, I want to
Okay.
talk about that too.
Right.
Yeah.
So get an Apple Watch, but you need an 8 or older. The newer ones don't have the EKG or the heart rate on there. But you should at least have something that at least has your heart rate. For me, that was like something where I could just see that my heart rate was right, but
The
that,
heart rate is one of the most sensitive signs that something's going on. When you think about your kids having a fever, the heart rate always goes up. You know, think about that as being like the metronome. How is my heart rate doing? Because all of a sudden, if your heart rate is high, it's compensating for something. Something's going on. And so that is one of the most important things for you to know, your resting heart rate. What's my heart rate during the day? You know, and it responds to emotion. How many of you felt your heart rate go up listening? Am I the only one that's that? Right? Don't you feel it? And as women, we tend to feel things in our hearts. That's how we live our lives. And so what we feel in our hearts and that it's increasing, that's real for us. But if it doesn't respond to calm down, let me take a breath, something's wrong. Something is wrong.
Deb.
I had a situation.
Oh, sorry. Is there another Deb? There's 2 Debs. Okay. There's 2 Debs. Sorry. Deb in the back, and then we'll move to the front.
First of all, I am so glad you're alive, sister. I mean, given the pervasiveness of this problem, what is the medical profession? Is there new training happening with new doctors and nurses that's going on? Because obviously, there's a problem. Is Houston doing something about it? Is there training going on actively in, I don't know, nursing school, in medical school, to say that women have heart attacks that look like this, And so why not assume that they're having a heart attack instead of not? Like, how does that change?
But it's medical gaslighting with women across the board. You have a story, I have a story that has nothing to do with this, having to do with gynecologic and babies, right? And who in this room, when you think about it, knew that something was going on and was made to feel by their doctor, by a hospital, that everything was fine? Oh, and I'm sure that if you really think about it, I'm sure every single one of you had it. I mean, I'm sure of it. Anyway, so what's
So let me
being
answer
done?
that question. It wasn't until 1993 that the Office of Women's Health was established through the NIH. Prior to 1993, there was no institution that required research to be done solely on women. Let's talk about the budget. 1/6 of the NIH budget is designated for cardiovascular disease, and of that 1/6, 2% is dedicated towards women and heart disease. Okay, so let's talk about the positive.
And how many women die of heart disease? What percentage?
Well, 1 in 3 women die of heart disease, more than all cancers combined. I'm not telling you all not to run for your mammogram, but I am telling you that the chances are, look to your left, look to your right, one of you will die of heart disease. 1 in 33 die of breast cancer. So we've made so many advances with breast cancer. We have not the same with heart disease. But let me finish the loop of that. From 1993 to present, which in science times is nothing, it takes about 20 years for research, it's clinical research over time, to hit medical practice. It's starting about now. When I was in medical school, we learned women did not get heart disease, and we spent literally 15 minutes talking about menopause, and that it was normal, natural, and it just happened. We spend 40% of our lives in menopause, and before you go, is that possible? Calculate it. We do. 40% of our lives in menopause, 70% of us will have some form of heart disease. Whether it's high blood pressure, blockages in the arteries, 70% of us will have something. So when I was in school, there was not a single conversation that women had heart disease. I started because I was trained that women were not getting heart disease. And in the emergency room, woman after woman came in with heart attacks. And I said, this is what I am going to do in my life, period. That was it for me. The next generation that are coming out now are getting educated. They are understanding. And they also have a little bit more knowledge that they're fearful they're going to miss it. So the next generation is definitely more aware. I'm gonna say the nastiest thing, I think.
You go right ahead.
Unfortunately, the previous generation's still around. And that being part of the problem is who you're taught by, who's your mentor, and who you get to see. And the reality is, in our society, many times the people with the best reputations are the ones that probably should retire. Yes?
Is there any correlation or scale of, as more women become physicians, some of that is changing? Or
100%.
like the percentages say, as you said, when you were in school, supposed to say now, more women are entering the profession, or?
So 50% of women doctors are now, 50% of doctors are now women. When I went into cardiology, 11% of cardiologists were women. You ready to hear how many there are now? 18%.
Oh my God.
It's the only place in the country where the men's line is longer for the bathroom than the woman's line is at a cardiology conference. It's unbelievable. So it's a little different, and research shows that women who have women doctors do better and have better outcomes. Research also shows that men who have women doctors do better. So there's that.
There is the best book. I want you to write this down on your Annie Gets It Done pen on your Annie Gets It Done pad. It's All in Her Head by Elizabeth Coleman. It is the history of all your body parts and what men would say about what was going on with women. It is fascinating. It is, listen to it. I never read, but listen to it. It's terrific. I want to just talk about, because I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be asking you questions afterwards. Tell us a little bit about Odessa, and we're going to be sending you an email as we talked about. So tell us about the app and briefly kind of what it does, and listen carefully, because if anybody wants to be a part of this is a really kind of special thing that's being offered.
I just want to say one more thing before I pivot to that. What happened with your heart is very unusual. It is not a typical heart attack. Sometimes it is not picked up on the EKG right away. And as you mentioned, it could be from the recreational things, but it could also be from the amount of stress. And that beta blocker that she never got might have actually stopped it in the beginning. It could have helped, it could have made a difference. When we all think about this organ that's here, it is honestly the one thing that we don't connect to. There was a study of 2,000 women, and they were asked, what is your greatest health threat? 98% of those women said
Breast cancer.
Then a survey was done with another group of women. Do you know what your greatest health threat is? And they said heart disease. Then both of those groups were asked, we understand you think breast cancer is your greatest health threat. We understand that you know it's coronary artery disease. How many of you personally feel that heart disease is your problem? 13%. We all need to get connected to this organ, because this is truly the metronome of our lives. It has been carrying us throughout our lives. It carries our joy. It carries, more importantly, our pain, our angst, our heartache. It carries it and it becomes inflamed, and it stays really, really quiet until one day it doesn't anymore. And if you start thinking about it a little differently, you might understand that it is so important for you to take care of it the same way you would take care of your child, your puppy, your cat. You can't say cat anymore in this country.
Say pussy.
But we've all got to think of it differently. I spent my entire career, I mentioned when this started, I was in my training in the emergency room and said this has got to be different for women. It was literally day one when this began for me. 20 years ago, Go Red for Women started through the American Heart Association. I was one of their first spokespeople. I always say they never invited me. I just showed up and started screaming, and it stuck. I wrote a book, I've been speaking on television and all the things. But for 20 years, I've been saying 1 in 3 women die of heart disease, more than all cancers combined. We're not doing a good job. We're just not. So a couple years ago, 2020, I left the hospital system. I sat there and thought, I am gonna stay in this fabulous institution and continue to say these same statistics, or I am going to leave and do something about it. Unfortunately, COVID came, but it was the biggest gift for me to understand one of the most important lessons, that if we don't have access to care, that there is a place for technology to fill the gaps, that it can level the playing field, that it can actually take away the gaslighting if you go through an algorithm. If you ask the questions that should be asked, Do you have a family history? What are your symptoms? If you go through those questions and it comes out with the end result, you're at high risk, you need help. You don't get to be the object of someone's subjective opinion of who you are. And so I built Adesso. Adesso means now in Italian, the language of love and romance. And ladies, if the time is not now, I don't know when it is. Adesso is a software platform designed for primary care doctors. A doctor I work with in Arizona is using Adesso in her clinic. That saved that woman's life. And it's partnered with an app. We have the app available for you all to use if you're interested. We want to make it as wonderful, as usable as we possibly can. And we're offering to all of you for free, if you want to join us on sort of a journey of meeting. Lisa and Ali, who are here, are going to be part of meeting up with everyone to go through it, answer questions. I'm going to jump on. We have Zoom calls that we're setting up. Patients of mine will be a part of it as well. And we want this communication to begin with you. Here is my vision. This is to get Adesso, the consciousness of Adesso, into the hands of all women across the country, partnered with the clinical Adesso in the hands of primary care doctors and gynecologists across the country. So when a woman has trouble, she can get Adesso and go anywhere across the country to get the right testing, the right prescriptions, not to be dismissed, not to be ignored, not to be gaslit. And guess who's in control of this conversation? You are. Because on your app, there are sections like how to advocate for yourself, what to say when you go in the emergency room, what tests you need, how to talk to your doctor, how to do this, and how to live your life from the bottom of your heart to out to the world with vitality, with anything you choose to do. And we always say, what is your now? When Anne was there and I heard her voice, my girls, my girls, my girls, and it's like that thing that just is going to drive us to make the choice to stay the healthiest we can be. So after tonight, we'll send you an email, and if you so choose, I'd love you to come on board and help us out and be part of this. And I do want us all, and to really start a viral spread of this, to come on our social media, it's called My Adesso, to tell us what your now is, to tell us your story about gaslighting, and to share with other women that they are not alone.
Because I'm an intuitive, all right? There were two, and it's funny, I was talking to Julie, there's two books. One is Dying to Live by Anita Morgiani, and the other one is Proof of Heaven by this not scientist, a surgeon.
Yeah.
And the thing that as you were talking, I was going, you had to go, now this is not, you had to go through the experience from a really, heartfelt situation to write a book, get on with Suzanne, deal with everything that you have to deal with, to prove to the world that something has to change. So you can be the major, because you've got that kind of spark and personality, and you know you do. You can be the major force in something actually happening right now and spread it around. So unfortunately, you went through the experience, but that experience is going to be mind-boggling and global when you get this whole thing started with the app. I remember when you were starting the app, it was a while ago.
Yes.
And it's at this perfect time that the two of you were coming together. You actually had that experience together, and now you're going to blow the lid off of everything together, which makes it so powerful.
I want to be mindful of the time that we have, because I usually just definitely cut this by 8:30. So Suzanne is gonna be here to be able to answer some questions. I know she also has to go. I just wanna, there's several things that came up that I just wanted to have you make note of. One is when you travel, you must make sure that your insurance company will cover you a lot when you're in another country. Just because you have travel insurance, that just might cover your lost luggage. You have to make sure that your insurance company covers you, and if it doesn't, you have to make sure that you have it. The other thing is air transportation. Now, if I wasn't able to fly back, even the flight that I had to lay down. It was 10 hours, I was traveling. So if you're, I think it's 110 miles away from your house, because you can be in the middle of Pennsylvania and be in a terrible hospital, but need to get home to a major hospital. There's a company called MedJet, and they will even transport you by an ambulance. Because you, again, could have you could have an accident someplace. It can be international, it can be in the country. It doesn't happen right away. It's only like $600 a year, but it will cover that transportation, and that transportation can be really expensive. Always make sure you're writing down your medications when you're given them in the hospital. Write them down. What are they giving you? Ask, take a picture, know how much you're taking, and look it up. Ask Siri. Siri is your friend. An Apple Watch, it's important. You don't necessarily have to wear it, but especially if you go on vacation and you're someplace, it was a lifesaver for me. I mean, like really, like just to have it and to be able to have it, and it made me feel better. And I have to ask you about this because I've always been I have this like bag of stuff that I would always carry on a plane, because I always seem to be the person that's on the plane when somebody's having a medical emergency. I'm the only one that gets out. But should you carry baby aspirin with you? Because what I'm wondering is, like, if you start to have chest pain, like, is it something that you should just take and then like ask questions later?
I'm so relieved. I thought you were gonna be like, so do I go on the plane and give my baby aspirin and start doing? I was like, yeah, please, you gotta take care of yourself.
No, but I mean, but also,
But
like,
yes.
would you take baby aspirin? I mean,
100%. We used to.
I
there
carry
was a-
my makeup kit.
Everyone should have aspirin with them.
And baby aspirin. When you say aspirin, is it bare aspirin or like how much aspirin?
So if you think you're having,
to chew it, not swallow.
and if you think you're having a heart attack and you have baby aspirin, chew 4 of them.
Okay.
Oh, wow. What happens to just putting it under your tongue?
They don't dissolve. That's a nitroglycerin, which would dissolve. An aspirin you have to chew.
4 baby aspirin.
Baby aspirin.
What is baby?
81 milligrams.
81 milligrams?
81 milligrams is Bayer. They are the ones that.
And they
market
taste
that.
good. They're like, why not? But carry them with you. Carry them carry them when you travel. Because it's in the middle of the night, and what's the big deal? You chew some aspirin. It's not a big deal. Go ahead.
I would love to say one thing though. So,
Please.
and you said earlier that you felt guilty for your girls about going on this trip and then getting sick. So I think Marlo Thomas taught us all that parents are people with children,
Parents are
you did
people.
nothing wrong. And please don't carry that guilt, please.
And thank you for saying that, because I did part of, when I was talking about that, I now shout it from the rooftops. I don't care. I was eating mushrooms. I was not in an earth. I chose a place. I did my research. It was legal there. I went there to help myself. I wasn't getting high. I don't even drink. I don't smoke pot. I don't like to be high. I was doing it because I thought that it would help lift the shit that I felt that I couldn't get rid of. And that's why I was there. I was there to be a better friend, to be a better parent, to be a better person, really. And then that happened. But I do feel like it lifted. I mean, I had a heart attack, but I gotta tell you, it lifted. And I did feel terrible, and my kids have been very traumatized by it. But I just have to be the example of, you learned from that. My kids kept saying when they were there, but we didn't have any adults with us. I said, but you did it. Look what you did. Look what you helped me. You know, and the other thing, when you were saying about don't wear any makeup, at one point when I was brought back to the hospital, and I was back in there, I turned to my girls when everybody walked out and I said, listen, I'm going to exaggerate this. I was having trouble breathing. I knew I wasn't right. I knew something was wrong. But I knew I had to make a scene, and I was going to have to make it be worse than it was. You know, I knew it was bad and it was hard, but so I was, and so they learned from that. They learned from me. So I don't feel guilty about it. I don't, and thank you for saying that. I don't. I don't. I'm not going to be doing it again. But I don't feel guilty. I don't feel guilty. It's all good. It's all good. Two more. You choose. You choose. Pick.
I did plaintiff's medical malpractice for a long time before I got back into nursing as a psych nurse practitioner. So one magic word, I went to an emergency room 2 years ago and they tried to discharge me. The physician's assistant came to discharge me. And I said, well, that's not happening and you need to do blah, blah, blah. And he disappears and he comes back and he said, the doctor said you need to go home. And I stood up and I said, please tell the risk manager I would like them to come and see me. I will be calling the president to the hospital and my next call will be to the Department of Health. Please tell the doctor in the emergency room that I'd like a visit now. 2 minutes later, that doctor came tearing down. So I've been saying I'd like to speak to the risk manager who manages the medical malpractice. That's been very effective. Department of Health.
Right.
I will be calling the Department of Health. I have not seen a provider. Here's the list of tests I would like, because I'm not leaving. I said, you must be mistaken. I don't know who you're talking to. I'm not leaving. Go discharge somebody else. The good part is you'll get somebody who will actually realize that you don't feel well.
Right.
And that it's very foolish, because they know a lot of medicine. Most risk managers in major New York City hospitals are nurses, or nurses and lawyers. And when they know that you've asked to speak to them, you're not a person who's going home.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Also, pick up the phone. I mean, it was obviously very difficult for me to do so in the Netherlands. But you all know, and I've said this before, you know the friend that's going to have your back and make a scene in a productive way. Get your A-team together, call, and you know, it's even for a rainy day, it's raining, call in the cavalry, but I promise you, if anybody needs anything, call me, because I will be that person that will show up at the hospital, and I will make a scene. I will. And I will help anybody that I know to get somebody there, but truly, always call me. Anyway, we've got to end this. But Suzanne is here.
I'm hoping you have a doctor to advocate for you, that you're not going to have to call Anne. Like for real.
No, for real.
For real.
But here's the thing.
Your doctor needs to be your advocate.
Your
It's
doctor
really
needs to, but
important.
you are very, very rare. You are very, very rare. And it should be. I mean, we should all go to doctors that we have their emails, that we have some kind of direct contact, that we have somebody that you can call and, you know, call her. Thanks.